Yeah, welcome back to Ireland Radar. We are just three sleeps away from Ireland Czech Republic on Thursday, and today I'm joined by Czechia football fan Josh Donaldson. Josh, how are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No bother. Sure, we will just jump. We'll jump straight into it. We of course have had you on before. I believe the last time we had you on, it's kind of a lot of turmoil with the Czech national team. Suchek had been stripped of captaincy. You were managerless. I think there was some tensions between fans and players as well. Our Irish fans have obviously been following a lot what's been going on in Czechia. Obviously, Kubek coming in. Suppose could you kind of describe for us what's the current mood in Czechia ahead of the game on Thursday?
I think, like in most of life, I think absence makes the heart grow fonder. So the fact this group have not been together for a few months is probably a good thing. They've had some time to get away from international football, which is, as you sort of mentioned there, it got very sour. The new manager in charge is a very experienced guy, Miroslav Kolbeck, and he's brought together quite an interesting squad for this playoff round. Um, the mood here, I would say, is one of realism. I think the people that I've spoke to, they understand the Irish team are coming in with some really good form and with some really good momentum, which the Czech team just don't really have. There were two wins the last time out, but they were both against very small sides in San Marino and Gibraltar. So it's a bit of an unknown what we're going to get on Thursday night, and I think that's what's kind of reflected within the mood that if they do lose to the Irish, it's not the end of the world, but for a lot of these players who are in the squad, it's probably the last chance of making a World Cup.
Yeah, and just on, you obviously name dropped Miroslav Kubek. He's obviously recently been appointed manager, very experienced manager. How kind of do you think he's going to set Czechia up, and what kind of manager is he? If you could maybe tell us a bit about him.
Yeah, his best success is it domestically here in the Czech Republic. He's done very well at Victoria Pilsen. He's had three spells there over, I think it's around 20 years. So, he's been around a lot and he knows how to set a team up. I wouldn't expect any extravagant football, that's for sure. I'd expect a very limited game plan. It's playoff football. It's not something you're not looking to play your most creative football, but you're looking to win the game. So I'd expect a very solid 4-2-3-1 or a 4-5-1 in defence, led the line by Patrick Schick, I'd imagine. But yeah, his CV is pretty good here. I think he won Manager of the Year back in 2023 with Pilsen. He's won trophies as well with them. So he's got a good reputation. He's never managed on the international stage though. That's one thing. The only role he's had is with the under-19s of the Czech Republic, which was a few years ago now. So it's difficult to say how he's going to do in this game. But I think he's probably the best man for the job at the moment. It's a bit of a firefighting role, and given the amount of experience he has at 74, I think he can certainly put a team together that can certainly put a fight. Have a put a fighting performance together.
I know you said there you think they're going to play a four at the back. There's been some talk in the Irish media anyway about Czechia potentially playing a five at the back. I know John O'Shea, assistant manager who does the pressers, kind of the pre-match pressers here for Ireland. He was asked about the possibility of Czechia playing a five back. What kind of formation do you think he's going to play? Is he going to go five back, four back, or what do you think?
Again, given that it's his first game in charge, it is understandable that a three could be played or a back five. I mean, they haven't they don't have the sort of creativity that some of the bigger nations have, but the Czechs have played a back four under the last coach. Maybe he wants to change that up and play a back five just to be a bit more solid there. But given the sort of players they have available to them, I'd imagine a four at the back is more likely. um, but again, that can probably shift. You've got someone like Souček who can play further back and probably can go into defence. There's also someone like Ladislav Krejci who plays at Wolves. He has in the past, especially at Sparta Prague, played a bit of a hybrid role between defence and midfield. So they've got a couple of options there that they could deploy if they want to, be a bit more fluid. But as I've said, it's a first game in charge. I'm not expecting them I'm not expecting him to be a bit like Pep Guardiola, for example.
Yeah, and just on like the Czechia's record at home, like I was kind of doing a bit of research earlier, and I think I believe anyway that like Czech Republic have not lost at home in 17 games. I think dating back to a 4-0 loss to Portugal back in the Nations League in 2022. How big of a task is like going to Prague? And I've kind of heard a lot of discourse about the stadium and how intimidating it is. How kind of big is a task for any nation going to Prague and trying to get a result against Czechia?
Yeah, it's certainly a it's a bit of a daunting task. I think it's 16 games, but yeah, it's certainly a high number that they haven't lost at home. The interesting thing around Czech football is they don't really play in one stadium. They don't have a national stadium, so they do move around a lot, which is quite interesting given that the record is so good. It'll be played at Eden, which is Slavia Prague's home ground. It is a bit of a fortress for both the national side and for the club side. Like you said, it is quite an intimidating atmosphere. It's quite a steep stands. The ultras for the club side and for the national side are very loud, very vociferous in their support. Um, it can become quite a tricky atmosphere to play in. I've been there this season in the Champions League covering games. I think Slavia played Arsenal and played Barcelona, and even with defeats in both games, the atmosphere does not drop. So that's one thing that the Irish will have to contend with. But given how well you played in Hungary, which is a similar sort of atmosphere, a similar sort of country with how they support their teams, um, I don't think it'll be too much different to that. It's a much smaller stadium as well. I think it only holds around 20,000. So, it won't be that sort of cauldron that you've experienced before. So I don't know how much of a challenge that will possess. And given the squad is made up of a few new players and loads of old heads as well, um, it's again difficult to tell how much of an impact that will make.
Yeah, and just to touch on obviously some of the Czechia players coming into the camp in form. Obviously, Pavel Sulk at Lyon and Patrick Schick both scored at the weekend and are probably kind of the main dangerman from an Irish point of view anyway. From our own knowledge, obviously Irish fans will be like familiar with Thomas Suchek and Ladislav Krejci, who obviously play in the Premier League. But like, what other players maybe do you feel that maybe go under the radar in this Czech team that an Irish fans may be unaware of that could play a big part on Thursday?
Yeah, there's 14 of the 25 man squad are domestic players, so I wouldn't be too surprised if you hadn't heard of too many of them. They've also just a quick aside, they cancelled the Czech League here at the weekend to give the 14 players who would have played at the weekend another few days together. The squad met up on last Thursday, so they'll have a week together with the new manager, which is pretty unheard of, and certainly won't be the same for the Irish team, I would imagine. The couple players to look out for, there's one returning player, which is quite interesting. His name's Vladimir Darida, plays for Hradec Králové, who were a mid-table side in the Czech division. He's 35 and hasn't played for the Czech team for nearly 5 years. So him coming back in is quite an interesting, I think, take from the manager to say that he wants more experience and wants players that have played at tournaments before, which there isn't too many in the Czech side who have. And he's been very good this year. He's come back into the Czech league from a spell in Aris in Greece, and before then he was a pretty high profile Bundesliga player with Hertha Berlin. He scored 8 goals this season from midfield, which is his highest return in his career. So it suggests he's changed his game and adapted. And that's probably something the manager's looking at as well. If I just bring up the squad list here, I think the other ones to look out for, it'll be interesting to see who they pick in goal, firstly. Mate Kovac has played the last few games, and he's probably familiar to some of your audience given his spell in the Premier League. So he'll probably play in goal. But if he doesn't, then it's either Lukas Hornicek, who plays in Braga, or Martin Jedlička, who plays for Ostrava here in the Czech Republic. But yeah, if you look at elsewhere in the squad, the strikers are very interesting. If they do go one up top, we'll expect Patrick Schick, but it's who can come off the bench to either support him if they're chasing a goal, or even if they have a lead. Someone like Tomáš Chory, who plays for Slavia Prague, he doesn't mind getting his elbows out. It's probably the nicest way to put it.
Is he
He's
6'8"?
he's massive. Yeah, he's a
Yeah.
very big guy. Not the quickest, as you probably kind of expect from a guy that tall, but he's a real engine up front. He chases the ball very well. He certainly caused Arsenal problems in the Champions League when I saw him, and he's someone I would be a little bit fearful of against your centre backs, especially if they don't want any bloody noses.
Perfect, yeah. Obviously, kind of a lot of Miroslav Kubek and Nedved have kind of had a lot to say about Ireland, the build-up, like Irish fans and myself anyway, has been kind of reading a lot of the Czech media and kind of just seeing what they've had to say about ourselves. What would you kind of say is the general perception of this Ireland team in Czechia? And then maybe Irish football, as I suppose, as a whole. I'm always kind of interested to see what other countries maybe think about Irish football.
I think given that Troy Parrott played here last week for AZ Alkmaar against Sparta, and he scored in both legs of that tie, I think they know that you're a threat. I don't think any Czech fan is under any illusion that this game will not be difficult, and that your results in the last couple of qualifiers suggests, that you are a team on the up, and there's a lot of solidity within that squad now. I'm a Southampton fan, for my sins, and someone like Ryan Manning, who has been very good at left back for us. I'm not sure whether Bazunu will start in goal, but he's someone who is pretty solid now at that sort of level. And a lot of these Czech players, as I said, 14 of the 25 play in the Czech league. The Czech league is not a high standard, other than Sparta, Slavia, and Pilsen, who are the top three teams. A lot of these players do come from there, but they also come from other clubs, as I've mentioned earlier. So the level of the league is not particularly high. Obviously, the players who play abroad have that higher standard. But in terms of quality between the two teams, I think most Czech fans understand that this game is going to be really tight. I had a check of Opta earlier today. They have the Czech Republic as 51% favourites. I think the Irish around about 24% win probability. I would say that's much closer to being 40% each, with the draw being about 20%. I don't think, myself, I think this will be a very close game. I think most Czech fans would agree. And I believe Ireland are probably the stronger team at the moment, if compared to what I look at with the Czech Republic and the last 12 months they've had on the pitch.
Yeah, just to maybe touch on maybe why you think that in terms of maybe the weaknesses in this Czechia team, like from an Irish perspective, I'd probably say the current weakness in our team are probably the midfield. We've no Josh Cullen. We kind of lack that player to control games. There's some fitness issues as well with Chidozie Ogbene, who's crucial to us. Evan Ferguson obviously out injured, so they're probably our biggest kind of concerns going into the game. What are maybe kind of some of the Czechia weaknesses from your perspective and some of the concerns that you would have going into Thursday?
I think their biggest weakness is the fact they've not been tested at this level for a long time. So there's a lot of players who don't have experience of really high caliber games like this. There's obviously Patrick Schick, who your audience will probably remember from the Euros that was played in the UK, where he scored from the halfway line. And there's also obviously Premier League standard players like Tomas Soucek, Vladimir Sufal, who used to play for West Ham, and a few others. But I think those players, as your audience will know, are aging. Patrick Schick is no young spring chicken anymore, nor is Tomas Soucek, and the players behind them are not at that level that they were maybe 5 years ago. So I think the weakness for me is that sort of solidity in midfield that you speak of as well. Soucek runs games very well at international level, but that's normally against weaker opposition, and he can't do it all himself either. There is question marks over Pavel Schultz's fitness as well. He is just coming back from an injury at Lyon. He got minutes at the weekend, but the manager has said that they're not too sure how much he'll be able to play, given the size of the fixture. I imagine he'll play as much as he can. The other big weakness for them is the leadership aspect of the team. So, as you mentioned earlier, Soucek was stripped of the captaincy, and they haven't revealed who the new one is yet. They've told the Czech media that there is one, and the player has been notified, but they have not released that to the wider audience, which suggests to me which seems quite odd, right? Like normally, if you have a captain, you'd want them to lead from the front, and by doing that, they're shielding him behind, to essentially wait until he walks out of the tunnel, and that in itself I don't think that gives any security to a new captain. And the fact that the leaders they do have on the pitch, like Patrick Schick, he said in the media that it won't be him. So that level of, if things do go south very quickly, or they find themselves 1-0 down early on, that's when I'd be interested to see how they react, because in recent times they've crumbled a little bit. So having that pressure, this game is massive for both nations. If you see them fall behind early, I'll be very interested to see how they react to that.
Yeah, I think leadership is probably one of Ireland's strengths since kind of Seamus Coleman and John Egan were both brought back in from the cold in the last camp, and a lot of the players kind of talked about how that made a huge difference. And Seamus Coleman probably is going to start on Thursday, even though he's playing little to no minutes at Everton. I just kind of want to also touch on maybe some of Czechia's strengths. Like I am from like the outside looking in, I kind of look at their team and maybe see some similarities to the Irish team in terms of maybe how they're scoring their goals through set pieces or kind of getting balls in the box. Like during qualifying, maybe how did they kind of score most of their goals, and what do you think their strengths are going into the game as well?
Yeah, I think you're right with what you say there. They, like I've said earlier, they're not going to be um, scoring anything, too creative. It's going to be pretty one-dimensional football, I'd imagine, and those set pieces will be massive in this game. Are 100%. You know, the Czech team have big targets like Socek and Schick, who, are big guys, and they do win a lot of headers. Socek is, he's very well known for it in the Premier League, and although Schick is a bit more than just a one-dimensional player, he'll be a real big target at set pieces. Um, yeah, so I don't expect too much more than that, really. I mean, in terms of creativity and who could open the door, that really is down to Pavel Schulz. He's done that consistently, firstly in the Czech league and now with Lyon, where he's taken a real step forward with his development. And he'll play, I imagine, behind the striker or coming off one of the wings, and that'll be the player really to watch. I would say if they can keep him quiet, then it's going to if the Irish can do that, then that's probably the easiest way to victory. I would say.
Yeah, I did read quotes that Pavel Sulk himself said that he is 100% fit. I'd say every player is going to probably say that to play in a game of this magnitude, but again, it will be a huge plus if he doesn't play or doesn't play the full game from an Irish perspective. And then I won't keep you too much longer. I just kind of wanted to ask you, given all that, how do you see the game going? This question's kind of a bit relevant now, but I was looking at the bookies like yourself, having the Czechs as heavy favourites, and I know you kind of disagreed with that. But yeah, that just kind of how do you see the game going? And as you said, I don't think you were agreeing with the bookies' view of things.
I'd be interested to see whether both teams have practiced penalties or not. I think it could go that far. Really, I don't see too much between these two teams. You've mentioned the atmosphere. We've spoken about that. That will play a part, I'm sure. Um, Given that it's a new manager and the players really do have something to prove with this Czech team. Both nations haven't been to a World Cup for more. For well, in the Czechs' case, 20 years. In the Irish case, a little bit longer. So
24, yeah.
yeah, so it's in terms of how I see this game going. I see it being pretty physical. I see it being pretty scrappy. To be honest, I see quite a lot of high intensity to start with, and then if we do see an early goal, I think that will reflect how the two teams then set up. I don't think there's going to be too many goals in this game. Um, if a team does score early, or at least in the first half, then I could see either really shutting shop and trying to just hold on to a 1-0. It's not going to be too expansive in that sense. But yeah, as I said, I'd be very interested to see who's been taking penalties and who's up for the challenge towards the end of the game, because I do think it could go that far.
Yeah, and two very good goalkeepers in Kelleher and Kovar as well. So that would be interesting if it does go for penalties. Just a last question, Ronan did ask me to ask you this. He's over in Prague at the minute. He was just wondering what is the cheapest pint in Prague, and also would you give any maybe advice for Irish fans going over there?
Yeah. So just like most of Europe, I think the cost of inflation has impacted Prague as much as anywhere. So the price of beer has gone up substantially in the last few years. You used to be able to get a pint of pretty ordinary beer for 17 crowns, which I think works out about 60, 70 cents. Um, I think now you'll get one for about €2 in pretty much every pub, and it's top quality stuff. So, I would probably recommend that the Irish fans avoid the sort of natural watering holes that certainly Brits and others venture into when they go to a new city. But they can expect a pretty friendly atmosphere in the Old Town Square. I imagine that's where most of the Irish fans will congregate on the day. It's always pretty jovial in these places. They'll certainly have a great beer, good food, pretty basic meat and potatoes, but it works. Certainly fill you up before the game. And I'm not sure what the rules are in Irish football around whether you can drink in the stands or not. You certainly can't in the Premier League.
Yeah,
But
it's kind of like you have to drink before you kind of get to your seat in the stadium. I know
yeah,
I did hear that I think there's going to be maybe more strict restrictions on like drunk fans coming into
yeah.
the stadium and stuff. So maybe do mind yourself before entering the ground.
You normally can drink a beer in a Czech stadium, like within in your seat. So that's a plus point. But yeah, it's certainly worth not risking it before the game, given how big this is. If you're traveling over to Prague, but certainly do enjoy yourself. There's plenty to see, and there's plenty to do as well.
Perfect. Let's hope for a great occasion anyway, regardless of the result, Josh. Thanks very much.
No worries at all.